America's put more carbon in the atmosphere than any other country since the beginning of our industrial revolution. Like, we've powered a lot of this crisis. Yeah. And we have comfort second to none in the world. And now we're going to go to countries that are not as industrialized and say, I know you want the fridge to put your collagen peptides in. But unfortunately, you don't get to have the advantage of industrialization that we did. How can we, with a straight face, go to countries suffering and put any limits on their growth?
I mean, the reality is we can't. They're sovereign countries. They get to do what they want to do, and they have every right to develop. And so the only thing we can do in the United States and other rich countries is use our purchasing power, use the power of the federal government and our investments to make clean energy cheap enough to power the world. And we're doing that.
100 of these companies create 70% of our global emissions. Wouldn't it be better to hold our noses, to not villainize them, to understand that no industry is ever going to cut its own throat and take away its profits? How do we bribe them? Like, if you had to sit down with the guy from Shell and ask them a question or get them on board, what would you say?
I would look at the question a slightly different way. How meaningful is it to hold someone to account when they're working as part of a system? You know, putting so much focus and attention on the energy company, if we're going to do that, we're definitely going to fail. Because we actually have to look at the whole system. What we need is to change the conversation away from this combative argument, you win, I lose. And it needs to be much more about cooperation. How do we get countries to work together to scale technologies?
You were at Shell for a bit. They were sued by activists, and a judgment was won that Shell had to reduce their emissions by, I think it was something like 40%. Is that also a tool that will be used in the future to incentivize some of these companies to come along?
I think, you know, Shell can change, but the problem is that if a company like Shell exits sectors like aviation or shipping or these really hard-to-abate, high-carbon sectors, the net effect, Shell might transition, Shell might lower its carbon footprint, but the net effect on the energy system is pretty unchanged. I mean, when I was at Shell, I advocated quite strongly that Shell shouldn't try and sell its high-carbon businesses, that it had a responsibility to work with its customers and to think through how it helps them transition their business. I'm not really sure that these kind of legal judgments necessarily help shift the energy system.
What I would say to the Shell argument, too, is maybe Shell cuts their things by 30 or 40%, but you're talking about Saudi Arabia as a petrostate, Russia has gas, but like, they would be happy to make up the shortfall, and all of a sudden, over this 30 and 50-year transition, all we're really doing is enriching some of the most egregious governments throughout the world.
The system is so big, you can't only solve it by suing oil companies. You need to make everybody's investment, business decisions. When you go to the dealership to buy a car, it should just be a better decision for you to buy an electric car. When you choose where you get your electricity from, it should just be a better decision for you.
But you don't even choose. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't choose where I get my electricity from.
Yeah, so the utility will choose it.
Bruce Springsteen, who powers New Jersey with his love of the everyman.
I think the key word here is accountability. Accountability and transparency. Some of the groups, Shell included, but also other chemical companies, petrochemical companies, oil and gas companies that have been seated, quite frankly, on some of the very same land that plantations were on in the American South, or in vulnerable populations in the global South that have a history of mistrust and mistreatment. Asking those very same people to say, trust us, we'll fix it. When you rain the sulfur down, we'll give you a rain slicker. Like, they don't get that, nor should they.
Right.
Talk about accountability. I mean, you can try to hold a company accountable for selling the products that we demand from them, okay? But you can definitely hold a company accountable for going in and opposing legislation that will make us move faster towards a clean energy economy. You can shine a spotlight on companies that run misleading advertising that makes everybody think that things are fine when they're not, right? Those are the kinds of actions that affect the political power balance that really do either slow down or accelerate this transition. And so when oil and gas companies are on the wrong side of that, yes, we should hold them accountable. But the only entity powerful enough to stand up to and force incumbent industries to change is the US government or other federal governments, right? So we need national policy. that says we are going to do this differently, and we're going to make it profitable for you to do it differently. And either Shell will
Don't you
do
have to do that, though,
or
because
someone else will.
They have us over, and please, God forgive me for this pun, they have us over a barrel.
When you talk about how to get it done in the policy level, that's where we run into problems. So if the laws that are created don't allow for us to implement, how can the government do anything?
That's right.
If we don't have voting legislation, because according to a Yale climate study, no offense to Princeton, black and brown people are more likely to vote for climate policy than anybody else in this country. But if black and brown people are being kept from voting, then how can the government even have people in place that will push the power?
Now that political power sounds like the most urgent part of this solution. Fossil fuel companies have so much power in this country, and they have the power, unfortunately, to destabilize the governments that would do the most to make that transition. And so what I'm saying is co-opt whatever their greed principle is to make it so that they own this transition, or at least part of it, so that they're no longer incentivized to oppose it, because that accountability never happens, because behind closed doors, there's too much money involved, and so in some ways, we have to bribe them.
But it's a feedback loop, right? You need policy to change the incentives so that they have an incentive to invest in the right stuff, so that the policy gets easier, and that's how we win. So you need to intervene in that loop somewhere, and that takes people power, right? That takes concerned investors. So wherever you can get into that loop and lean on that lever and move it faster, that's how we get that thing going.
What do you think would be faster, the grassroots investing strategies of putting pressure on them, or saying to them, 30 years from now, you won't have a business, but here's how you would have a business?
It takes policy to make that threat real.
I think it's a combination of both. You've got young people who are moving and not only standing outside and protesting, but running for office.